Hey everybody, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about how the graphics settings affect your FPS value. I'll be going through each one of them and seeing how they affect my FPS. So stick around if you want to figure out how you can optimize your system. Let's get to it. So first I need to give a little context about my setup because FPS is going to be very setup dependent. So your experience is going to be different than mine, but you should be able to get a rough idea from what I'm seeing to help adjust your own settings. So I'm running a triple 1440p monitor setup. That's a 7680 by 1440p resolution. So that's a decent hit on my GPU. It's pretty heavy load. I am fortunate enough to have a 5090 NVIDIA card. I'm running a AMD Ryzen 9 7950 X3D processor, and I have 64 gigs of RAM. I've got the latest Windows drivers, all updated. I think I'm on the latest NVIDIA driver as well. And also of note is that we are on Assetto Corsa Rally 0.3 now. They just released that update a day or so ago, so I was pretty curious to see if they had made some improvements to the performance engine graphics and stuff wise there. So that's what kind of prompted this video. So without further ado, let's jump into the game and start messing with some settings. All right, so we're in the game now. And as you can see, I got the graphics set pretty low right now. I've got them actually set to their lowest values. And I'm currently getting about 158 to 158, 157 FPS. So something of note here is that my video recording software is causing a significant hit to my FPS. I use OBS Studio to record, and when I typically record, I use the gameplay capture mode, which has the least impact on FPS performance. I'm currently using the display capture mode in order to be able to capture this Steam input bar up here. If I was using the gameplay capture mode, I think I was seeing close to almost 200, maybe a little over 200 FPS. So the display capture mode is causing a significant hit to my FPS right now. But yeah, so that's our baseline 157. Let's jump into our graphics settings. And first off, I'm gonna just go over quickly what I have set here on display. This won't affect your FPS much. It's, aside from your resolution that you're running, if you have triple monitor or single monitor. I got my screen resolution set to automatic. I'm using display mode full screen, and let's skip over some of this stuff. This is all my triple screen setup, kind of my settings to get the field of view set up correctly for myself. These two down here might have an effect on it. I mean, the frame limiter does. That's going to limit your frames. I have that turned off. I have VSync turned on. I'm not really sure if that affects FPS or not, but I'm leaving it on. I'm not going to go into that one. Let's jump over to graphics. And I'm currently on a custom preset right now because I've set basically everything to its lowest value here, including the resolution scale. And you'll notice I'm also using the TSR anti-aliasing method here. I have an NVIDIA card, so I could be using the DLSS method, but I've been noticing some issues with that, like some weird flickering and some weird artifact stuff when I have that enabled. So I've switched over to TSR, and I don't really seem to experience that much, experience those issues that much. So if you're experiencing that, try TSR instead of DLSS if you're in that same boat. So the first thing I want to go over is the resolution scale. Um, Quickly here, if we go back to the presets, there are the various, low to ultra to custom. Notice that the very low one has the resolution scale set to 50%. What I'm noticing is that it seems like for every 5% that you increase this, you take about a 3 FPS hit. So if we were to go ahead, and it does improve the visual quality quite a bit up to a point, is from my experience. I'm gonna set this to the same level as the low, which was 50, or the very lowest preset, which was 50%. Let's go back and just see how that has affected my FPS. We were at 158, I think, ish, FPS wise. And let this kind of stabilize. So yeah, we took about what, like a 15 to 16 FPS hit by jumping up 17%. I've noticed too that yeah, there is a kind of a limit as to where, this from my eyes anyway, as to like how much, if you increase that up to a point, you see kind of reduced gains visually. For me, I think that around the 60 to 70% mark is where I kind of stop seeing any visual gains. So I'm going to go ahead. So we were at, well, I think we were at what, 142, 141. Let me change that value up a little bit. So as I mentioned, I think it's about a 3 FPS hit per 10%. So if I jump up to 60, I would expect maybe another 6 FPS hit on that. So we were at like 142-ish. So I'm expecting it to go down to like 136 if I set here to 60%. Let's see if that theory holds water. Here we go. Let this stabilize. Ooh, 132. So 10 FPS hit. So maybe it's maybe 3 to 5. Maybe is maybe a better number there for every 5% that you increase that. So, yeah, that covers that one. I'm gonna jump into the next setting now. Or actually, no, actually, I'm not. I'm gonna stick here real quick because something else that affects FPS that I notice is the camera view that you use to drive. And from what I'm seeing, the interior view has the biggest impact on FPS. So yeah, I'm currently getting what, 131. If I jump out to the back view of the car, I think we'll see a few FPS gain. So I'm gonna do that now. Yeah, so we jumped up like 2 or 3 FPS by going to the external view of the car. And the biggest change is if you actually use the front view of the car ahead of the hood slash bonnet. So I'm gonna jump to that next. We were, yeah, 133 out exterior. I think we were like what, 131-ish inside. And so if I go to this view, you can see we jump up to 145. So this is the view where you have the best FPS camera view wise, I think. And then there's another view. You can do the hood slash bonnet view here. It's a little lower FPS than the front of the view car, but it's also a little higher than the rear outside view of the car. It's kind of in between there. And then if I jump back into the interior of the car, this is the view that I normally use. This is my preferred driving view. You can see we're back to 131. So that's just an interesting note there on how the camera view can affect your FPS. So we'll now jump into the next setting. And I always leave frame generation off. I, I just, yeah, prefer to have that off. We're going to kind of go from top to bottom on these graphics quality settings. And this first one is interesting from what my experience so far. On the interior view of the car, I'm noticing there is a significant hit if you turn this on, outside as well, depending on the value. But in the interior view of the car, when you go from off to any other value, like low, medium, high, the FPS hit is the same. So if I go from off to low, that's going to be the same FPS hit as if I go from off to high on the interior view of the car. It's a different story on the exterior view of the car. So we were at 131 FPS, I think, when we had this off. So let's just turn this on to show that when we go back. So I'm going to start it to low first. I think it's around like a 20 FPS hit with this setting. And this is, I think, the setting to do the reflections off the car, like, trees kind of reflecting off the metal, that sort of stuff. And let's just stabilize. So yeah, we took, well, let's go jump around a little bit there. We were at 131, so 15 to 16-ish, maybe a little bit more, hit. And I'm going to jump to the exterior, the back view. We're going to see that this took less of a hit. If you recall, I believe we were at like, what we were at. I think we're almost about the same value with it off, 133, 134. So when you go from off to low on the exterior of the car, there's not really any hit. But if we start changing that value from like low up to medium or high, we're going to start seeing hits on the exterior view. So let's go back and change it from low to high, just to kind of show that off. Let's see, I don't want to do a restart, kind of force of habit from crashing so much to go to the restart. So we're gonna go from low up to high. We were at that 134-ish mark. Now we're gonna see a bit of a hit now when we go back. Let this stabilize. So now we're close to the same value as we were in car with the low setting. We just have like more metal out here, so there's like more to reflect. So that's kind of makes sense, I guess, in my mind as to why it would jump when you go from like low to high. I'm gonna jump back into the interior view of the car. And let's see, we're on the high setting now. If you recall, we were at that, I think about that 112, 113 mark. You can see it hasn't changed going from low to high. So that's just an interesting thing. You go from low to high, interior wise, no change. So this is my preferred view. I would prefer to have some reflections on maybe the hood that I can see. So I'm gonna leave this on high for myself. If you're an external view driver, then you might want to play around with like going from low, medium, or high, since that has a different effect. All right, so we are at the 113, 114 mark. Let's go on to our next graphics setting to see what it's going to affect. And that is our screen space reflections quality. This one I'm not really sure like what it does. Screen space reflections, I imagine that's maybe the glass on the the gauges maybe, or I'm not, if you know what this means in detail, maybe give a comment in the video below, not in the video below, in the area below the video here. So I am curious what it does, but I'm going to turn it to low, just to basically turn it on. Let's see if there's any FPS hit from wherein I think we were at 113, 114 before. Let's go back and check it out, see if we have any hit. So maybe a 1 FPS hit-ish by turning it from off to low. I'm gonna kind of keep the view to the interior from here on out. This is my preferred view. I'm not gonna be going through all the different camera views to see how these settings affect them, but if you have a different camera view, you might wanna see how that affects things. So I'm gonna jump up from low to the highest setting just to see if there's any difference. We took maybe a 1 FPS hit just by turning it on. So let's go back and crank it up to high as the highest value. See if there's any difference. No difference from low to high for the interior view of the car anyway. So yeah, let me know if you know what that setting does visually, because I don't really notice any big difference visually from what I can tell. But yeah, I'm gonna leave that where it's at, and we'll jump on to the next setting, see if that has any impact on FPS. Yeah, I keep wanting to go to that restart button. Texture quality. So this is kind of like, yeah, like the road textures, maybe some other textures, but I think from what I'm seeing visually in my experiments anyway, is that the road texture seems to be the biggest thing that changes visually for me. So we're currently on low, and so I'm gonna crank it all the way up to, I think there's like an ultra value here. And if we go back, we were at what, 112 before. Seeing maybe another 1 FPS hit. This this might, be dependent, if you have weather, if you have like snow and stuff that might take more of an FPS hit, or mud, rain on the ground. But the biggest visual difference I see is like in the middle, like the tire track area here. That's a lot more detailed from when we had it off. So I'm gonna turn it back to low again. Just kind of pay attention to this, the tire track area and how that kind of gets a lot less detailed when we lower that setting. Probably affects like other things in in the scene as well, but that's what jumps out to me as being the biggest difference. So back to low, just kind of pay attention to that road area. Now you can see it's a lot less detailed out there on the road. Not like the rock specifically, but like just like kind of the dirt area. So I'm gonna leave that cranked up to the highest setting since it only seems to be like maybe a 1 to 2 FPS hit. And but again, that might be dependent on the weather a little bit. Um, so it doesn't seem to have much of an impact FPS wise. So it feels like a safe one to keep on a high setting. So anti-aliasing quality. This is one, I mean, I kind of get the concept of what anti-aliasing is. I believe it's like it affects the like blockiness around objects. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know in the comments. Um, I'm not sure how much this setting is dependent on the mode you're using. So again, if you know that, leave a comment. But from what I could tell, I couldn't see much of a difference visually, I think, going from like low to like high. We're currently with this set to ultra, we were like what, around the 111 mark for FPS. So let's crank this all the way up and just see the impact on FPS. I believe it has a small impact, if I remember correctly. Oh, a little more than small. It's a good 10 to 12 FPS hit by going from low to ultra there. And I'm not really sure if I see a drastic difference. Maybe my eyes are a little bit bad, but yeah, I'm just not seeing a drastic difference here. And so is it worth it to lose 12 FPS? Let's go to the, like, I don't know, like the medium or high setting just to see. I'm gonna go to high next to see if that has much of a difference. If I remember right, I think going from like ultra to high, like the high wasn't as much of a hit. It was like a pretty low hit actually, if I remember right. So we're going to change this down just one level. And let's go back. Yeah, so going from ultra to high, we gained like 8 or 9 FPS. Going from like low to high, we were taking like a 3 FPS hit. So that seems like a safe way. But maybe don't go all the way to ultra, maybe go to high. 'Cause going from high to ultra seems to be this most significant impact. I'm gonna leave it on high because maybe it's making a small difference, and 3 FPS seems like a decent trade-off for a small difference. All right, so let's jump on to the next setting. Man, I keep gravitating towards that restart button. Um, all right, so now we're getting into some of the ones that have a more significant hit. Besides I think turning this on was a decent hit. The reflections quality, dynamic reflections quality specifically. Shadows quality does, they even call it out there on the top right of the screen. They have a description of there, and it says they have a significant, they have a little typo there on significant impact on performance. So let's go from low to high, or I think maybe ultra, and see what kind of hit we're getting. We were at what, 108 ish before after we adjusted the anti-aliasing. So let's go back and see what cranking the shadows up does. So we took about 14, 14 to 15 FPS hit by going from low to ultra on shadow quality. It does have an impact visually, like I think specifically like in the trees, I noticed a difference in the shadow quality a bit. This is probably going to be, weather dependent as to how much of an FPS hit you're going to be taking. Like, if you're going through forest area with like sun shining through a lot of the trees onto the track, that's probably going to be a bigger hit. Kind of dreary day here in this Wales stage right now, so maybe it's not as impactful as it could be. But let's go back to low. Kind of pay attention to, I think, to like kind of the tree area here on the right side of the track and in front of us. Just to see the difference in the shadow quality and with this current weather anyway. So let's go back. We're gonna go back and crank this all the way down and confirm. It just doesn't seem like, I think particularly out in the front area there, maybe, yeah, it's to the right a little bit in the trees. It's not as good as it was on Ultra with the shadows. So I'm gonna try going one level lower than Ultra. We're back to what, to 109, and we were at like 93, 94 FPS hit. I'm curious if it gets a similar effect with anti-aliasing, where the high is a good bit um, better than Ultra FPS wise. So let's try that again. We're gonna go from shadow quality up to the high mode instead of Ultra mode. Not as, yeah, definitely not as big of an impact going with like the anti-aliasing, where it was like a big jump. It was like a 2 to 3 difference jump. The shadows do look better out there in the trees. I'm gonna try jumping it down one level lower to medium to see if that is a decent jump FPS wise without losing too much of the shadows in this current scene anyway. I'm sure, it's definitely gonna be weather dependent as to how much visual improvement you're gonna get by turning those up higher. We got a decent jump going from through like what, 95, 96. We got like a 6 FPS jump going to medium. I'm gonna leave it there, I think, for now. I might play with these later with different weathers just to kind of see how that plays out. But yeah, so we're at like what, 102 now. So let's jump on to the next setting and see how much of an impact that has. I believe the next one is clouds. And this is gonna be another weather dependent one. Here in this Wales stage right now, I think Wales is kind of dreary all the time. It's just kind of, it's not a lot of cloud action going on. It's just kind of a grayish day. So I think if you have a lot more clouds going on, or it's gonna probably be a bigger impact. But they do call it out again as being a significant impact going from different settings here. So if we're gonna jump all the way up to ultra, we were at 102, 101 ish before, and we come back. Yeah, not a big hit. I think it's because this Wales weather isn't too crazy. Just like what, the 2 FPS hit. I do see like one kind of cloud up there above the trees. Nothing else. I mean, it's just kind of a hazy-ish gray day out there. But I'm gonna leave this at ultra for now because it hasn't made any kind of hit. But play around with the weather and see if that has a bigger impact for you. So let's go on to the next setting, since that one didn't seem to have too much of a hit in this particular environment. And here we have characters quality. This is specifically the characters inside the car, or the driver and co-driver, and they don't call out a significant hit. And I think from my experience so far, by having this up to high, I haven't seen a significant hit either on my end. And you can't see it in the recording, but on my right hand screen over here, I can see the co-driver's like the helmet in his face, and it does look less, fuzzy and stuff when it's on the higher settings. And since it's not much of an FPS hit, yeah, basically none in my case, maybe one ish. But yeah, the co-driver does look pretty clear. So definitely worth keeping up high for me. If you're an external view user, maybe not as applicable to you. You might save 1 FPS by having it low or something. Um, maybe a little bit more external view wise, because maybe the rear view mirror might affect that in the car. But yeah. All right, post process quality. This is just the quality of post process filters and screen space effects like motion blur, ambient occlusion, depth of field, and bloom. This might have more of an impact maybe when you're actually moving then. I'm not going to be going, crazy detail with this video and doing all kinds of experiments with moving and stuff, but I believe like when we're sitting here, there's not much of an impact. They don't call it out as being much of an impact on this description. So I'm gonna go all the way from low to ultra. We were at 100 to 101 FPS before, and I believe it does like make a decent visual change just sitting here too. I think things do have a little better color and stuff to them. We took maybe a 1 to 2 FPS hit by going from low to ultra. It is possible that when you're moving though, that 'cause it's mentioned motion blur and stuff, that you might start experiencing a bigger impact in that state. But from this view, I'm going to leave it as ultra since I'm not seeing a significant drop. All right, let's go to the next one. And this is foliage quality. This one does have a significant impact, and they do call it out in the description. This is the trees in particular. I think I've been noticing like for each like level that you change, it's almost like a 10 to 12-ish FPS hit, maybe a little bit more. So if we go all the way up to ultra, we were at 99 FPS before. I have a feeling we're going to drop to like low 70s or maybe even to the 60s here by having this cranked all the way up. Yeah, we're in the high 60s now. So we dropped 30 FPS, 30 to 32-ish FPS, I think. And I mean, the trees do look really nice. They have a lot of definition to them now. But since it's such a significant impact, I'm going to lower that down to maybe medium or high. And, oops, sorry, I pressed a key combo there that kind of reset things. But let me adjust that now. So let's jump down to high just to kind of see the difference there. And you can see we gained like, yeah, almost 12 FPS. It doesn't look that much drastically different to me. I have noticed that if you jump from like high to medium, there is definitely starts to be a difference visually. So pay attention to those trees in the very front of us. Just front left, just a little bit there on the center. If I go from like high to medium here, you're gonna see a couple of those trees kind of get kind of fuzzy. The rest of them will look kind of pretty decent. If we go from high to medium. So let's go high to medium. We were getting like what, 79, 70, 79 to 80 FPS on the high setting. Yeah, if you look up there in front of us, a couple of those trees to the left of center are significantly more fuzzy than they were before. The remaining trees look pretty decent. We gained about 7 or 8 FPS by going from high to medium. Um, my goal personally is to stay above 60 FPS for video recording purposes. And gameplay ideally as high as possible, but I want the visuals to be as good as possible um, for video recording. So I sacrifice my FPS to try to provide a good visual experience to the viewers. So I I might I'm getting close down, getting close. If I start driving, I'm gonna get varied FPS. So I'm gonna leave it here at medium. Um, I might go back and like turn off like the oh I forgot about that. So the video recording software, that's the mode that I'm using is causing a significant hit. So I'm actually gonna jump this back up to high, and when I switch back to the gameplay capture mode, I should definitely be able to stay above 60 FPS pretty normally. So I'm gonna keep it on high instead of medium for me. So I think we'll jump back down. When we do that, we'll jump back down to like the high 70s to 80 FPS wise. Let's just confirm that. Yeah, 80 FPS. So I'm gonna leave it there. I'll jump on to the next setting and see what it does and how it affects things. Grass density. And as its name implies, it's how dense the grass is on the sides of the track. Probably in fields too. I don't think I've driven in too many field area. I think there's some in the France stage. Um, but yeah, so with it low, this one doesn't, it says a slight impact in there, and that's my experience too, is it's slight. It's like if you go from like low to like high, I think it's like a 5 FPS hit. So let's go to continue. We were at like 80. Actually, it's even lower in this case, like 2 to 3 FPS hit. Um, if you look up there by that first sign, like the square with the circle on it, that sign, if you look to the left of that, if I turn that back to low, you'll notice like some more bare patches. So let me do that real quick just so you can kind of see what that setting's doing. Um, the video graphics, grass density, and continue. Yeah, if you look up there by that square sign, it's more bare there now. On my side monitors that you can't see in the recording, definitely more bare. It's yeah, less than a 5 FPS hit. So I'm gonna crank it up to be nice and dense. Let's do that. Yes, we were at like what, 77 ish FPS with that cranked all the way up. So let's look at this next one. This is the effects quality, and this is the visual effects such as subsurface scattering, particle effects, and sky atmosphere. So we were at 77-ish FPS before. Let's crank this all the way up to see how much of a hit that takes on us. So about a 3 FPS hit. And I'm not seeing like, a huge difference visually, but a 3 FPS hit, I'm sure, if I drive, it might be very scene dependent. It might have a more dramatic effect in other areas of the stage. But since it's pretty low FPS hit, I'm just gonna leave it on ultra. So it's, yeah, worth it in my mind to crank that one up, just for a 3 FPS hit, and maybe it'll add some cool effects throughout the stage. Yeah, if you know more about what that setting does, like specifically and scene wise, give a comment to enlighten the rest of us. All right, car damage quality. With this one, if you haven't damaged your car, the value that you set here is going to have zero impact on FPS. If you The FPS hit is going to occur when you start having damage, and I believe it's going to be a higher impact to your FPS if you have damage and you use the external view of the car when you're driving, because it's going to show more of the damage. In the interior view, the only things that get damaged visually, I think the glass, the windshield, like the door can come unhinged and even fly off. Rear mirror can get wiped off. So I don't think it has as much of a visual or a FPS hit if you have damage when you're in the car as if you were doing a external rear view of the car. I think I don't know that for sure, but just to show that has no effect on FPS, I'm gonna crank it up to high. And there's no damage. If we go back, you can see we're still at that 74, 75 mark after we had cranked up the grass density. So I'm gonna leave that cranked up. But yeah, if you wreck a lot and you continue to drive while you're wrecked, you'll see if you don't do the restart like I do quite a bit, you will start having a hit on your FPS if you have that set to a higher value. Crowd and Marshals quality. This one they do call out as having a significant impact. From my experiments, I think just sitting here at this point in the stage, I'm not seeing a significant impact, but I think it does. It mentions the animation quality. And I've noticed that when I've had this on the low setting, as I'm driving throughout the stage, there's less people like, waving and doing the flag waving. There's less spectators running out into the road to like do the picture thing. As you crank that value up, you get more of those animation effects. So yeah, I've noticed like if I crank this all the way up to ultra here, I think there's like a minor FPS hit at this particular scene, but I think it I think it's more apparent. The FPS hit would be more apparent when you get to like more crowded areas that have a lot more spectators. I think it also like increases the number of spectators as well. Just like visually wise, I'm not seeing a big difference in quality of how they look. You can see my FPS has taken like zero hit in this particular scene. Um, but so I'm gonna leave it cranked. I think once I switch my display capture to gameplay capture, it won't be a problem for me to stay above 60 with that cranked. But yeah, not a huge impact. It's gonna be scene dependent. I think most of these settings are going to be scene dependent. So next one is our interactive elements, and it says the higher values can have a significant impact. This is like like if you like are hitting things like cones, um, fences, signs, that sort of stuff, barriers. The quality of those things, like the animations of they move and stuff. Um, that's going to have an impact. I'm not sure if I can't remember if it has an impact on like I'm just sitting here stationary and everything around me is pretty stationary for the most part, object wise. People are moving a little bit, but I'm gonna crank this up and let's go back. We're at what 74, 75 before. Yeah, it's still 74, 75. 'Cause I'm not like interacting with anything on the road. So I'm gonna leave it cranked. But yeah, I think that will come more into play if you're like hitting things. Or if there's like some sort of objects that might move by themselves. Not sure what those would be. I am thinking just now. I'm thinking back to that previous setting for the like the spectator animations and quality. Since we're on Assetto Corsa 0.3 right now, they released the Monte Carlo stage, and I believe they're having a lot of fireworks and like the flares. People are doing flares in the crowds. So I think I would imagine, I haven't tested this, but I would imagine that that setting would impact those types of animations. Particularly probably the crowds and the flares. And I think it's a pretty crowd heavy stage as well. So I imagine that values would be something you might want to adjust on that stage, depending if you're like racing in day or night, too there. All right, so we're getting close to the end here. If you're still here, thanks for tagging along. So our last one here is the car's LCD display quality. And this is, yeah, talking about I think this might impact if you're an external view user, this might not have much of an impact, but if you're an internal view user like me, it says LCD gauges in particular. It calls those out. I, I'm in an older car right now, the new Lancia that they just added, which doesn't have any LCD screens, but I think I remember right. If I did crank this up, there was still like a minor FPS hit. Sorry, I'm like looking around my steering wheel. It's right in front of me. It's kind of blocking a little bit of the view there on my screen. Oh, actually, so maybe I was wrong about that. Yeah, since this car has no LCD screens in it, I'm not seeing any impact on FPS. If you're driving one of the more modern cars that does have an LCD screen, you might see an FPS hit value there by cranking that up. So I know this wasn't like crazy in depth or anything, but I hope it might have helped you. And if it did, please comment, like, subscribe to help my channel grow. I would love to interact with you guys in the comments. Yeah, so I really hope this was of benefit. And if it was, even if it wasn't, I still hope you have a great day. So take care and have fun playing with your settings.